We are reading Li Lun, Chapter 4, Night. Li Lun awoke suddenly and sat upright. His heart was pounding with fright. Something had awakened him, but he did not know what. It might have been a gull trying to get on the ledge, or it might have been a rat. A stiff south wind was blowing over the low wall, and he felt chilly. The sack of rice was still beside him. He felt for the bundle of clothing and the poles. All were safe. He lay down again and tried hard to sleep. But such a parade of things ran through his mind. First the pig. One of the island pigs had come grunting into their house that morning. Pigs coming into a house brought bad luck. His father had chased it out quickly, muttering, "We don't need ill fortune on our fishing trip." Had the pig brought ill fortune for the fishing trip, wondered Li Lun, or had it brought the bad luck that had sent him up the mountain to grow rice upon the rocky top of Lao Shan? He thought about that until a rat ran over his foot. Then it occurred to them that he could put up a mat to keep out the wind and the rats. He rose to his knees and felt the left side of the ledge. There was a ridge facing the rock which would hold the pole. He ran his hands over the rocks to the right of the cave. A jut of rock stuck out a little way. There was a flutter of wings and a cry of distress. That jut of rock had been the roosting place of several seagulls. Li Lun caught up one of the bamboo poles and placed it as his curtain rod. Over the rod he hung the mat which had carried the soil. Now, he thought, perhaps both the rats and the bad thoughts will stay outside. He would not take the dragon bones yet. He might need them worse later. Besides, he was not really afraid. Li Lun lay down again. For a while he thought about the gulls. Now and again one of them screamed, as if it were having bad dreams, Li Lun decided. Perhaps the rats were bothering the gulls too. So many things made fear sounds. Going to sleep alone in the cave was not so easy as sleeping on the mat at home with his father and mother near. There, if spirits were around making noises, his mother chased them away. Here, there was no one to help him shove back the night. The wind moaned above the mat and rushed into the cave like something running. But there was nothing he could do about that until the sun came up again, except to dread the dark. The frightening sounds made his heart pound heavily. Something scraped against the bamboo poles. His heart raced at the thought of what it might be. Was that the wind too? Li Lun shivered as with the cold, though the night was too warm to be chilly. He wondered if perhaps he should take some of the dragon bones. If only he had Ming, with her soft fur and yellow eyes, for company. Almost he felt her fur and heard her purring. What were all of them at home doing, he wondered. It seemed as if he heard his mother saying the words, "Remember, Li Lun, you are not afraid. And Sun Ling, inner spirit will keep you strong." No, he would not need the dragon bones this time. He thought of spirits flying around, but they could not get into his cave. They would have to turn a corner to do that, and spirits could fly only in a straight line. Still, he pulled his knees up under his chin to make himself as small as possible. The quieter he tried to lie, the more furiously the wind blew upon the Lao Shan. Its howling and blowing made Li Lun recall the story which all the island people knew, the story about the wind and the water and Lao Shan. Lao Shan had once been called Mi Shan, beautiful mountain. Mi Shan had grown proud of being the tallest thing about, taller than the sea and taller than the wind. The mountain bragged about its tallness until the wind and the sea whispered together and decided to destroy it. They would put the proud old mountain under the sea where all vain things belonged. Mei Shan laughed at them. The trees on its side waved their arms playfully in the breezes, and birds sang in the branches. The sun hid itself behind dark clouds and for days did not shine. The winds from all over the earth rolled themselves into huge black clouds and hung above Mi Shan. Angry waves from the sea rose up to meet the winds. Together the winds and the waves lashed and tore at Mei Shan until everything on it was destroyed. The grass and the trees were uprooted and the ground was washed into the sea. Houses and people were swept into deep waters. Of all the families that had lived on the sides of Mei Shan, only 2 were saved. They had hidden themselves in a cave. The mountain itself stood firm, but because its beauty had been washed away, from that time on the people of the island called it Lao Shan, Sorrow Mountain. Li Lun thought about the name as he huddled in the little shelter. Never had his arms and legs been so cramped. Never had fear thoughts stayed with him for so long, and never had he been so happy to see the morning light. He pulled down the mat and ran to look over the low wall. The sea was still living and moving in great swells. It was blue and purple, streaked with rosy promise of a sunshiny day. It was not angry at Lao Shan, nor to be angry with the fishermen today. Peace breathed across its broad, smiling face. Li Lun raised his eyes to the heavens. The sun had not yet risen, but how beautiful the sky, purple and blue, changing to red and pink. Dawn had not yet reached its fingers to the island. Below, gray mist shadows from the sea blanketed it. But here on the mountaintop, the light of dawn touched everything. And we're going to go straight into chapter 5, which is called Planting. Suddenly, Li Lun realized that he was pinched with hunger. He had not opened the rice sack when he reached the mountaintop last night. He had been too happy over his safe arrival to think of food, and so exhausted that he had wished only to rest. Now he smacked his lips in anticipation as he untied the sack. Something to eat. He took a handful of the brown rice kernels. His eyes grew big with surprise. Dried squid was mixed with the rice, and shrimp and seaweed. "Precious mother," he murmured as he touched his lips to it. Tears came as he remembered how she had looked at him before he left home. Could that be only yesterday? His heart beat lighter as he munched the unexpected delicacies. Li Lun was eager to plant the rice. 4 moon changes was a long time. He could not get started too soon. But if one must work, one must likewise eat. While he chewed the kernels, he would look for places where he might plant the rice. Taking another handful of the rice grains, he set the sack back in the cave. Then he walked about, looking first for sticks or reeds to place at the bottom of the rock hole. The growing rice plants would need something to which they could hold fast. In an old gull nest, Li Lun found some weeds. In another nest, he found reeds. He leaped about from rock to rock until he had collected enough. The sun was rising from the water. Its blue and purple changed to gray and green. A gentle breeze came through Gull's doorway. Li Lun sniffed the briny air and threw back his shoulders. It was good to be alive on a mountaintop. Now he was ready to search for just the right rock hole in which to grow his grains. Back and forth he walked, spying out every place where the gulls nested. He found 3 spots along the low wall which might grow rice, but the force of the wind coming over the wall would uproot the rice. The old one had told him that the basin must not be too shallow. So he began to search along the high wall. He looked as far toward the gull's doorway as he dared go. About halfway between the door and his cave was just what Sun Ling would have ordered, but it was as high as the top of his head above the rocks. There were toeholds to climb up. I might stumble and break a leg, he pondered. So he searched along the wall past his cave all the way to the stony path which led down the mountain. As he searched, Li Lun noticed that there was one spot which seemed to be more sheltered than the others. After looking carefully at several spots, he came back to the sheltered one. It was shoulder high above the rocky floor, and the sun shone on it all day. A mother gull sat there brooding her babies. "I must have this rock hole for my rice grains," Li Lun informed her. Sun Ling said it must look toward the sunshine. He measured its distance from his cave and found that it was only 15 man-sized strides. "That is good," he declared. "Yes, it must be this rock hole." He shoved the bird from her nest. "Sorry, Mrs. Gull, but you must give it to me." The gull answered by flying at Li Lun's face and trying to peck out his eyes. Li Lun shielded them with the crook of his elbow. Cautiously, he looked and saw 2 babies in the nest. The mother gull came closer and struck at him so fiercely that he had to move away. He went back to the cave to pick up a pole. Then, fighting off the gull, he moved her babies to another rock hole. But he had to leave for a while. She would not let him go ahead with his planting. The old one that had told him to mix with the soil some bird droppings for fertilizer. So Li Lun took a large flat stone and gathered from the rocks as much as Sun Ling had told him to use. When he returned to the black hole, the mother gull did not appear. Her babies were crying and trying to get out of their new home, which was narrower than the old one had been. Li Lun wondered if the mother had gone for food. He set about mixing the soil with bird droppings. Then he placed the weeds at the bottom of the rock hole and covered them with the soil from Sun Ling's garden. He breathed a blessing for the kindly old man with hair like a white cloud in the sunshine. Without warning, the mother gull struck at Li Lun's eyes. He shielded them with his arms and grabbed at the bird. "Over here are your chicks," he called as he ran to the spot where he had placed the young ones, but the mother flew away with the other birds that were circling about, protesting his presence. "I shall have to find another mother for you," said Li Lun as he watched the struggles of all the gull chicks. The new nest was waist high above the floor, but there were rats around, and rats could easily jump that distance if the mother bird was not on guard. He would see to this later. Now he must plant his rice. Li Lun went back to the rice rock. He reached in to his deep pocket. One by one, he took the grains from it and planted them in the deep, rich soil. Beside each covered grain, he stuck a gull feather. He took off his padded jacket and threw it over the soil to keep away the birds. Then he took a gourd dipper and went in search of water to flood the paddy field. By now, the sun was overhead. It beat down upon him. Perspiration trickled down his face and neck as he trudged back and forth with the dipper of water. Li Lun wondered where the fishermen were, how happy he was that he was not out on the deep sea. Suddenly, Li Lun realized that he was very hungry. He had drunk water, but that did not serve as food. He washed his hands one at a time by pouring water from the dipper. Then he took a handful of food from the sack and went over to the low wall. There he could look at the sea as he ate. Li Lun liked to watch the sea crawling and fighting the land. He saw below him the surf pounding against the rocks of Lao Shan. It rushed up and fell back, then came again. He leaned over the wall. Sun Ling's shack was just at the edge down there, but Li Lun could not see it for the trees. The food in his hand was gone. It was not lonely to eat by oneself, reflected Li Lun, if one could gaze upon the sea from a distance. He got up and stretched himself. He was tired from climbing up and down the rocks for water, but the rice must be kept flooded. Sun Ling had warned him that it took much water for both the reeds and the soil to soak up enough. Hour after hour, Li Lun worked. It was a short shadow time before he stopped to rest again. I am tired enough to sleep with my head stuck into a rock corner like those baby gulls, he told the water. When everything was finished for the day, he said aloud, I wish Sun Ling could see my rice field now. Proudly, he dipped his finger into the water above the planted grains. That night, no fears tormented Li Lun. The darkness and the aloneness had held few terrors for him. The wind whispered soft songs from the sea. Bad spirits stayed under the deep sea water where they belonged. If rats were around, they did not get behind his curtain, and the gull cries did not startle him out of his wits. They were simply shouting warnings to one another, he decided. Perhaps telling of a new fishing ground they had discovered. Men did the same things. The next day and the next, Li Lun had to carry more and more water. The rice must be kept flooded, and how thirsty the sun was. Hour after hour, Li Lun sat and watched for fear the gulls would get his rice grains. Almost from daylight to dark, he stood guard over them, except when he was carrying water from the rock holes. On the fourth day, Li Lun saw tiny green sprouts pushing their heads above the soil. He stared at them unbelievingly. It is true, he marveled. I can grow rice as my grandfather did years ago. He hopped up and down in front of his precious plants. If only my father could see, if only my mother could see, if only Sun Ling could see. He looked up into the sky to tell the wind, the sun, yes, the clouds too. The sun had hidden itself, but the wind was there and the clouds were there, so close upon him that they pressed their mists into his face. And the clouds did water his plants. They watered his plants for 3 whole days. They filled all the rock holes with water. For 3 whole days, Li Lun rested from his water carrying and let the clouds keep his rice field flooded. But Li Lun was not idle. I shall have to make a pile of stones, he told himself, to tell how many days are passing. Between showers, he collected stones for his calendar. He placed a pile of them just outside the cave. With the beginning of every day, he put one aside inside the cave on his calendar rock pile. 120 days for ripening, Sun Ling had said. Keep much water on the plants for 30 days. Suddenly, Li Lun heard a squawking from the baby gulls. When he looked, he saw a rat running away with one of the babies in his mouth, and he hurried over to the nest. That mother gull is not looking after you very well, he told the remaining one as it shivered against the gray rocks. I shall bring my shirt to cover you. He ran to get it. There, now the rats will not find you. I shall look after you if your mother does not. You shall be my pet gull. He tucked the blue shirt around the quaking little chick. Over the rock hole, he set up the bamboo pole, flying the red paper. For good luck, he told the baby gull. Then he went out to chase a mother gull or two from her nest. I must find some eggs to feed the baby gull if its mother is going to neglect it, he said aloud. But when Li Lun returned with 2 eggs for the little chick, he discovered that the rat had been there before him. There was no baby chick. There was only the blue shirt in the rock hole. Li Lun put his arm across his eyes and hugged the shirt. A sob choked him. Not even a baby gull for a pet. He walked slowly over to his rice patch for comfort. That's the end of chapter 4 and 5.